But the first and most important one, and this is kind of what I use when I do my normal lessons to teach people basics, is we're going to add in some cubes and we're going to make some walls for a little castle. So if we go to mesh, we've got plane, cube, circle, UV sphere, whole bunch of them. We're going to start off with, well, I mean, pick an object that you want. If you want to pick the monkey, if you want to pick Suzanne, go for it. If you want to pick a cube, go for it. Any object is just fine. I'm going to go with a cube because that's going to be the clearest when I work with it. So, as we mentioned before, we can select things by dragging a box over them or clicking them. That's pretty standard across most programs. But how can we manipulate this guy now? So we've got him here. We've got this little cube lad kind of chilling in the middle here. But he's stuck. So what we can do to move him is we've got 3 arrows and well, I mean all we've got to do to move her up is if we see this blue arrow up here that's pointing up, we can click it, click and drag, bring it up. Yay! So now the cube is no longer suspended beneath the floor. The cube is now on the ground. It's a little bit hard to tell, but you can now see that it's like parallel to where the floor would be. So, in fact, it's maybe still a little bit underneath, but we're not going to be too worried about it. So, now we've got our cube in a good position. What if our cube wants to walk? What if our cube wants to move forward or laterally? So we've got the 2 other arrows, and they work in exactly the same way as the blue arrow does on top. So you guys want to just work with that a little bit, move it around. Take your cube places, let it travel. And you want to watch out because there's this white circle in the center, and if you click and drag it around, it'll actually kind of move it relative to the camera. And you usually don't want that unless it's like a specific situation. Alrighty. So now that we've kind of chatted about how the movement works, we're going to talk about some other tools that we have. So on the left side, even though we had move selected by default, we actually got 3 more tools. There's a 4th one, but this 4th one is kind of different in a way that I'll explain soon. So the move tool is just, like I said, it gives you the option to move the object in 3 axes. If we click rotate, we're going to get something slightly different. So we don't have arrows anymore. We have 3 circles. Now that you've kind of understood how the move tool works, this rotate tool becomes instantly more intuitive. So click the different things, you drag them around, and you get different rotations. So now we've allowed our cube to dance, but now we can let our cube, or we've allowed our cube to move, to travel, but now we want our cube to dance. So cube is head bobbing, slamming something. I don't know what he's slamming. I want to listen to what this cube's listening to. Anyways, though, so the rotate tool is going to come in clutch in a second, but we've got one last tool that we need to use. So our scale tool. So scale tool is back to kind of similar view as the move tool, but problem this time is that it's got squares at the tips. What does that do? Well, try it out. As we can see, you start getting some stretching going on. So this is the scale tool, and the scale tool is going to let you stretch an object in different proportions. So if you want to make something like a wide monkey, for example, we can go up and open up our Suzanne, and we can take her and just make her wide. Look at her. She is powerful. She is unstoppable. We love her. We love Suzanne. Okay, so we're gonna go back to our cube, and like I mentioned earlier, we want to make 4 walls to a castle using these 3 tools that we've just learned. So step 1 is we want to actually make a wall in the first place. So how are we going to practice that? We're gonna make our little cube thin. Make it something like that. Make it long. And now we've got one wall that's just chilling. So, wall is looking good. What we wanna do next is you wanna kinda move it so that it's in an easier position to add some more walls. So we're just gonna click that red arrow and bring it to the left over here. By the way, if you all have any questions so far, feel free to ask on the Twitch page or in Discord. Um, I don't wanna move too fast for everybody. I wanna make sure that everybody's able to kinda, like, stay caught up. Oh, do we have anything in the chat? I'm just checking on the left side over here. Alright, perfect. So, no questions so far. Now what we're gonna do is we wanna make a couple more walls. Um, so I'll make one more by hand. I'll go to Add, Mesh, Cube, and we'll kinda, like, scale this guy up, similar to how we made the first block. So we'll take her there. We'll scale her down. And we'll make her long. There we go. Alright, so this is great and all. We can rotate our wall using the rotate tool. I should probably take a little bit more time on that. So yeah, we can select our wall. We can change to our rotate tool over here on the top left. You can rotate it. What we can do next is we can switch back to our move tool and move it to a spot where it's going to connect nicer to our wall. Something like that. Don't worry about it being too perfect. Just have it relatively aligned, and then and we've got a couple more walls to make still, so we don't want to be too precious with how we work on each one. So we've made two walls here. Now, it's gonna be a really big pain in the butt if we try and make every single wall the same way we just made these two. So what we're gonna do instead of, taking a billion hours to just make each individual wall is we can actually duplicate stuff. And I use duplicate all the time. I think it is the artist's best friend. Why make something 3 times when you can just make it once? Or in this case, why make something 6 times when you could just make it once? So we're gonna take this wall, exact thickness and everything, and we've got a little tool that we can use. So we can press Shift and D at the same time. And if you move your mouse around while you have this selected, don't panic, but you're gonna have your object fly around like this. And don't panic, but you're gonna lose all accuracy of where you actually place the object. So you don't want to be moving your mouse around when you press Shift D. Kind of the order of operations is you're gonna select your object that you want to duplicate. You want to press Shift and D, and you're just gonna do a left click. If you accidentally move your mouse a little bit, like you're like, oh god, I moved my mouse just a little bit. Now it's on the right side. Now my object's kind of messed up. What am I gonna do? It's not perfect. It's okay. We can just right click, and our object is pretty much back in place. We can see we've got two instead of just having. Just check on the Twitch chat. Perfect. All right, so um, once we've kind of got that going, once we've got our duplicate in order, it's going to be a lot easier to start adding in more walls. So our plan is we're going to make this like a little front of a fortress. So we're going to add in two, we're going to duplicate this guy as well, and we're just going to have these guys like be parallel from each other. So select that guy, Shift D, bring it over, switch to our rotate, rotate like this, bring it over like that. It's a little bit far away still. Again, I told you guys not to be too precious with the alignment, but I'm going to be a tiny bit more precious with my alignment. There we go. And you can still rotate it like just a smidgen. All right, not bad. So we've made these 2 walls. Or we've made these 4 walls. Now, we could duplicate each single one and then keep rotating it till we get exactly the shape we want. Or, what we can do instead is we can take the whole thing and we can Shift D the whole thing. And now we're saving ourselves some time. So now we can switch back to rotate. We can just do a full spin like that. Keep it relatively aligned. And now you guys can see why it's important to kind of rotate your camera around, because it's hard to see if something is aligned if you're always in the same view. But if you're constantly changing your view, if you're constantly rotating your camera around, it's so much easier to tell like if you've done stuff right or wrong. So there you go. And I can see from this angle, it's not quite right. There we go. So we've got like, I want to say, we've got 8 walls to a castle. Not bad, not bad. So, what is next on our plate? So what's next on our plate is we want to start trying out some other objects. Like, this wall is great and everything. We really love it, but castles are more than just walls. Castles are not just about the rough exterior. They're about Wait, no, they are just about the rough exterior. So we're gonna keep adding on to that rough exterior by adding in some towers. So we go to add, mesh, cylinder, click on that, and whoa, what's that? That's a cylinder. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna bring our cylinder up and kind of bring it to a spot where we're gonna like it. So I think I wanna have like 2 cylinders here on the outside and 2 cylinders there on the other side. So I don't want my cylinder to be like this short. I feel like it makes more sense for my tower to be taller. So what am I gonna do? Make my tower taller. Obviously, we don't want our tower looming in the underworld. We want our tower to be coming right back up here. So we'll just click drag it up. And there we go. Just like that. Wow, that was a lot of effort to make that tower. I can't wait to add another cylinder and start stretching it again and wasting my no. We're gonna select our cylinder, we're gonna save ourselves work, we're gonna press Shift D and click, and we're gonna bring it over. No extra work. If you wanna make a bunch of objects that are similar, please don't go into add, mesh, and add a new one every time. You don't have to. Save yourself the work. Be kind to yourself. Be a lazy 3D modeler. It is the best kind of 3D modeler. They get a lot of stuff done. You would be surprised. So, continuing our lazy streak, we're gonna select these 2 guys, and instead of, making each one on the opposite side, we're gonna press Shift D. I messed up, I moved my mouse a little bit, but not to fear. Just right click. And we can go back to our move tool and, you know, get our 2 towers over there. Hey, what's that? You want more towers? Okay, you can add more towers. So let's add some more towers. We can select all 4 of these guys. Or, maybe we'll just select 2. And we can kind of move them around and rotate them too as a unit. So, I don't know, we can move them a bunch of different places. I think what we'll do is we'll put a couple here at the front, and we can rotate them around so that they kind of take up this portico space. Kind of a janky castle, but, it's a castle nonetheless. So we'll bring that back. Maybe make this a little bit of a door. I'm just playing around with the design at this point. There we go. All right, sweet. We got a castle. It's looking good. Okay. So we've made the outside, and now that we've made the rough exterior, let's make the rough interior, shall we? So we'll select the whole thing, and my plan is going to be to duplicate this whole thing and just scale it in. So we'll press Shift D and click. Now we're going to go to scale. So we're going to come to a problem here. What we want to do is we want to scale the whole thing so that it fits inside. We want to like duplicate it in. But if we try and just do it with like each one of these, we're gonna get to this problem where like, it's like close enough to being symmetrical. I mean, actually that's really not too bad, but it's close enough to being like well scaled, but why be close enough when you could be perfect? Like we're not actually sure if the sizing is good both on both sides because we just did it by hand, right? We didn't perfectly mathematically like scale the x direction by this much and scale the y direction by this much. So if you notice there's this white circle that's on the outside of the scale tool, and this white circle is going to let you click, drag in, and what it does is it scales all three axes at once. So that way we're no longer panicking about whether our model is perfectly scaled. We're no longer panicking about our object being like wonky on the left side, wonky on the top side. Our object's just fine. So it's like a perfect copy to scale of what's on the outside. There we go. So nice. We've got like a little castle on the outside and a castle on the inside. Looks like a pretty abstract castle. Bring it up like that. Maybe make it a little taller on the inside. Have that tiered idea. If you ever have a hard time selecting more than one thing, you can always hold Shift to select more stuff. If you've worked with like Photoshop or Illustrator or like any other software where you have objects on the screen, a lot of the selection ideas kind of come across the same. So if you'd ever want to get rid of something in your selection, Control, and we can say bye to that corner if you don't want it. Or like, I don't know, maybe accidentally I selected these two on the outside. So I could just get myself into an angle where I only see that, and I just hold Control, and that's no longer there. Scale it up just like a little bit more so that the walls seem taller from the outside. And look at that, we got a little castle. Now that's great, but this castle is really collection of symbols, and that's good for us to kind of learn how to move stuff around. That's kind of good for us to learn how to rotate our camera, but we can add more detail to this. We can kind of go in and like make each section of the castle look more interesting. So that's what we'll be talking about in a second. Just want to check. Yeah, we love Shift D. We love Shift D in this house. Everybody appreciates a good duplicate tool. But yeah, as I was saying, Castle Blend, no good. What we want to do is edit it a little bit. We want to make it fancy. We want to give it some love. So what we'll do first is we'll go into this tower over here. This one in particular, it was just the closest one, no other reason. And we're going to jump into a whole new world. We're going to go into the edit mode. How do we go to this world? We just press, well, we have two ways. You can either press tab, and that's going, well, I mean, we have three ways. So you can either press tab, and that's going to bring you into this whole new section with a ton new options. The other thing we can do is we can go to where it says object mode directly, and you can click that, and it's going to give you a whole bunch of new options from which you can just choose edit mode right there. And then finally, the last option, which, sometimes is nice, is you can go to like the special modeling tab. And this option is kind of nice too, just because it's not just edit mode that it changes your whole workspace. So as you can see, we still have a little bit of clutter in this workspace. If we click on modeling, a lot of the clutter is gone. And we're like automatically in that edit mode. So it does two things at once. Okay, so what do we do? We have this tower here. We want to give it some love. We want to make it cuter, but we don't know how to yet. All right, so we're going to start talking about the innards of our 3D models. So we've talked about the outsides. We've talked about how we can move the whole thing. We've talked about how we can rotate the whole thing. And we talked about it really fast, granted, but a lot of what we talked about with the outside is going to be super pertinent when we talk about how to edit models directly. So another way that we can do a scale operation, so before we kind of like just selected the whole thing and we scaled it up and down, something that we can do here is we can actually just select individual parts of our model. So chances are you guys don't have faces on. Chances are you guys might have, vertex on or edge on. So if you look in the upper left part of your screen, right next to that edit mode button that we clicked together, you should see 3 different options. Now these 3 different options are the building blocks of all 3D objects everywhere in any program, unless you are working in voxels, which we're not doing here. So what do we do or what are these different pieces? So if you ever heard about polygon count in, whenever they talk about the new game with better graphics or whatever, they talk about like how many polygon counts or how many polygons does it have? So these are those polygons. So if you click on faces over here, this is what's going to let you select different faces. This is what's going to let you actually interact with those polygons. And these polygons follow a lot of the same rules as our bigger shapes. So in the same way that we had a move tool, a scale tool, and a scale tool and a rotate tool, we also have a move tool, a scale tool, and a rotate tool in regards to each one of these faces. So if I want to move this face up, it's actually gonna, it's like scaling it almost because I'm moving that face up, but it's not moving the bottom one up as well, or it's not moving the bottom one down as well. So if you want to do something like that, where like, I don't know, maybe we want the cylinder to be like super flush like this, that's one way to do it. So we can bring it back up. We want it to be at like the same height where it was, more or less. Now, we talked about how it's going to follow all of the same rules as a face. But it's also got some new properties that we can interact with. So edit mode is a lot more varied than just working in object mode because of the fact that we can actually change the amount of polygons that are on an object. So right now up here, we just have like however many, I think it's 32 polygons on the outside and one on the top and one on the bottom. So we can instantly double that if we select this top part and we click the very first tool that we have over here. So if you click on extrude region, there we go. I wasn't able to click it for some reason. If we click on extrude region, we're going to have something that's a little bit different from our move tool. So we're going to have a little yellow arrow, or a yellow plus sign that's on top of our face. So nothing's happened yet. If we haven't clicked on anything, it hasn't done anything, but try it out, see what it does. So let's click on the plus, let's drag it up. We just doubled the amount of faces we have. We just doubled the amount of polygons. Let's go. So it's not just for this top face that we can do it. We can also start, we can extrude more than one face at a time. So we could extrude this one out. We can extrude this one out. We can extrude this one out. We have kind of this, we're kind of starting to have some kind of a design for our tower. So, we can kind of extrude a bunch of these at the same time, or we can extrude a bunch of these individually. But we can, as I keep mentioning and not doing, we can also extrude a lot of them at the same time. So how would that look? So basically you would, maybe we want to extrude these little ones that we've just made on top. So we can press on that, shift click on, oh, what did I just do? Shift click on another one, shift click on another one, and we just keep selecting that way. So if you used Illustrator or Photoshop, like same selection hotkeys apply. Shift is going to let you keep selecting more. Control takes away. So like, I don't know, maybe I accidentally selected this. No stress, control, and then it's done. So when we're done with that, what we're going to do is just click and drag up. Whoa! Is that a design on our tower? This one's special. This is the one. So that's pretty neat. We love that. So that's just some of the stuff we can do with faces. There's even more stuff we can do with faces, and there's one last thing I'll talk about with faces before we move on to, edges and the other secret one, vertices. But the last thing we can do with faces that I'm going to talk about for now is if you click on a face and we go to our next tool, Inset Faces, it's going to do something a little bit different. And it's going to do something that interacts very nicely with the tool that we just learned. So we learned that if we click on a face, we can extrude it. We learned that, oh, do I recommend working on Blender with a tablet and stylus? I do not. I mean, it kind of depends what you want to do specifically. So if you want to, if you want to work with a grease pencil, and if you want to work with any kind of thing, or work with sculpting, then in that kind of a situation, I think, yes, a tablet and a stylus is like super useful. But I think for doing like modeling, hard surface modeling, which means moving around these objects like this, that's going to be a situation where it's a little bit nicer to actually just have a mouse. I think it's way easier. So that's that. So as I was mentioning, we can offset our faces in and do something like that. This is very cool for a couple of reasons. One is, I mean, the main reason is like, okay, now we have way more faces that we can play around with. So normally with castles, so yeah, we have this new face that's in the center, and we have all these new faces that we can interact with too. So many faces. So we can click this one in the center, and, we could do another one again, or yeah, we can do another one again, and we can move it down a little bit. That's going to give us this kind of cool ring effect. That's kind of neat. We can keep going on that idea. So we can click on it again, and we can go to our extrude region. So the tool that we just learned, the tool that we just spent a bunch of time on to extrude all these faces. And we can go ahead and just like click, drag it down. So now, if anybody wants to send in here, you've got a warrior that wants to chill, or just like two friendos that want to have a good time in here, they now have some room. They've got some space. They've got some space in their nice little tower. So now that we've done that, what's cool is that we can actually go back into object mode. And, it would be a nightmare if we would have to do this process to each tower. But luckily we don't have to. We can Shift D, and we can just move it over. And get rid of the one that was there before. We could do the same thing. Select our two towers, Shift D. Drag it over, and put our towers in a more useful place. So that is most of what working with faces entails. There's more stuff as well, but we're gonna keep it a little bit chill on that side for now. Next thing I want to talk about is edges. So polygons are not just editable by their faces, they're also editable by their edges. So just like we could select each face, we can also select each edge. So if we click, 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 you can see that all of these guys can be selectable, and shift click applies here as well. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna do something kind of neat to add a little bit of dimension to each one of these. I don't know, I would call them turrets. So what you can do is you can go ahead and kind of like click on each one. So click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, shift click, click, shift click, click. So once we have that done, we can switch over to a new tool, to a third tool. So we've got something called the bevel tool that's down here. Now what does this do? Well, like I say, the best way to see what things do in Blender is to try them out. So let's click and see what it does. So it's going to add an edge. It's going to add a bevel. That's what this edge is called typically. And if we do it again, it's going to add a second one. And then if we do it again, a third one and fourth one, whatever. So this is how the bevel tool works. And if we go into object mode now, you can see that this top section feels like it's really smooth, or it feels like it's very sharp in comparison to the rest of it. It feels like it's got this nice little highlight, makes it look really clean. And it looks just like a lot more polished than what we've got here on the left. So that's what the bevel tool does, and it's pretty neat. So that is the bevel tool. Last thing to mention is we've got something called the loop cut tool. So what's important to have in a castle is a throne for the queen to be chilling in there. Or, for like any kind of guard if she needs to chill out in there in a different tower. So yeah, I'm gonna think more of the proletariat here. I'm gonna think more of our little guard working there. So we're gonna make her a nice chair so that she doesn't have to be standing up all the time. And I'm gonna start with a cube. I'm gonna press add, mesh, cube. So you've got cube over there. You've got cube soon to be chair over there. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back into edit mode. And we're gonna do kind of like the scale operation that we did before, where we, selected the top and brought it down. So we're gonna go to our move tool right there. Choose the top of the chair, bring it down a little. Choose the bottom of our chair and bring it up a little bit. Just like that. Sweet. So that's not really a chair yet. That's just like a really bad cushion. Kind of like the cushion I'm sitting on right now. I need a better chair. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and add in some loops. We want to change this topology so that we can give the chair some legs. We want the chair to be able to walk. So we've talked about these three tools already, but we're going to move on to the next one, which is called the loop cut. Now, how does the loop cut work? All of these other tools have added geometry in different ways. So what the bevel tool did was it added kind of like a ring on the outside. Another face there. What the extrude tool did was it kind of brought a new face vertically. What the bevel tool does, or you guys saw the bevel tool, but what the offset tool does is it kind of adds a new face inside. Now what the loop cut tool does is it kind of adds in new topology in a slice. So what we want to do is we want to kind of like separate our chair so that we can make 4 new legs. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and loop cut in, click and drag to the left, just like that. Same thing on the right side, loop cut here, drag it to the right side. We're going to make 4 of these. We want to make like 4 squares in each corner. So just a little hint, if you're having trouble like getting this loop cut, this yellow section to come out at all, what we want to do is we want to just like make sure that you have your mouse close to a new edge that you've just made. Because like if you have it in the center, it's just not going to know where to put the edge. Like it's not putting the edge down anywhere in there. But the second you bring your mouse closer to an actual edge down here, now it's going to know, okay, the modeler wants to add in an edge, like along this line. So we'll click, we'll drag it. All right, we've got our back 2 squares made. Now we'll just make our front 2 squares. There, we go. Whoa, there's another one on the... I didn't mean to do that, but we're just gonna let it slide. We're gonna let it chill. So we wanna make 4 legs for this chair. We're gonna go back to our face tool. And we're gonna unselect this tool over here. We're gonna go to our extrude tool. So now we no longer have these edges that are coming out if we have our extrude tool selected. So what we want to do next is we want to go ahead and, click each corner. You want to extrude all of these at the same time, kind of like how we extruded these edges before. What we'll do is we'll go to the bottom, to our little rotate, and we'll click there, shift click there, shift click there, and shift click there. So what we want to do next is you have a little yellow plus sign, click, drag, down. We have a table. Wait, but we don't want to sit on a table. We want to sit on a chair. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I sat on a table in high school. Uh, but this isn't high school. This is Kingdom. This is the guard. She needs a chair to sit in. So we're gonna make her a more proper chair that's got a back. This isn't the Industrial Revolution. Our guards at least have backs to their chairs. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna select all 3 of these guys, and what we're gonna notice that's a little bit different from before is that they're all gonna kind of like come up as one unit. So all of this is connected because these faces they all had edges that were touching. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this still does not look like the most comfortable chair in the world. I don't know, honestly, it's kind of like mine, but it's gonna be good for our guard. They've got a back, it's got 4 legs. This castle's running on a budget. So what we'll do is we'll bring it up a little bit more, just like that. And looking great. Got a chair. Look at it. It's so beautiful and a little bit too big compared to the rest of the castle. It's kind of like a medieval times castle. It's like a little bit small compared to the chair. So we'll make the chair really small. Oh, I did a thing without telling you guys what it was. We'll click on our chair, click on our scale tool, and remember that remember that white circle we talked about before? You can click on it and scale it down. I'm gonna check the chat to see if you have questions. All right. So, what we're gonna do next is we're gonna go ahead and move the chair somewhere else. So we can take the chair, move it up like this. And kind of drag it to where it needs to be. Um, hey Melise, I just checked the stream. It looks like the quality's a little bit lower. Um, I wonder if we could maybe reset the stream or reset the screen share. Maybe that'll help. I'll stop my stream and I'll restart it. There you go. Oh yeah, that looks way better. Yeah, there we go. All right. Yeah, so I'm not sure how much it was blurry for, but we will keep going just because it's 6. We got an hour left. Wow, it's hard to be enthusiastic for an hour at a time. So we've got our little chair, and we can go ahead and scale it down. Um, and now that we're an hour in, it's time that we can finally talk about some shortcuts. So if you want to scale the whole thing at the same time without having to press here every time and then press here, and when I say here, I mean this white circle, you can actually just press S, and that's going to scale things down. There we go. So we've got a little chair for our guard. Our guard's not there yet. They're sleeping in today. I respect that too. Um, but they have a chair when they're ready to come to work. And, if you wanted to, Shift D, make some more chairs. Every guard gets a chair. Yay. So, you've got some chairs. It's looking good. You don't have to be standing up the whole time we work. I feel like I should probably stand up a little bit more though, considering how long I spend in a day sitting down. Okay, so once we've kind of finished up making some chairs, once we've finished up kind of understanding all of the things we can do with edit mode, one last little tiny thing that I'll talk about. And so we talked about faces, we talked about edges. I want to talk about vertices. So like maybe we want to make a specific change to our chairs. So I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit bland for it to just have this kind of like flat top. It's a little bit too straight. So what we can do is we can select these two top dots and these two top dots, and we can make it not straight. Yay! We love things that are interesting. Now it's not straight, and it's looking good. So, what we can do next is we can go into object mode, and we can just kind of look at our chair. Look at it. It's got an edge to it. It's beautiful. So that's just kind of the whole idea behind using vertices. Like each face can have between 3 or more. It can have 3 or more vertices, and generally when you're modeling like this, you'll have 4 vertices per face, and that's like the goal. You want most faces to have 4 vertices. But, sometimes you run into a situation where some faces need to have 3 instead. Now, what you'd never want to have is you never want to have a face that's got more than 4 vertices. That's when you're in trouble. So if somehow you land with a face that's got more than 4 vertices, and I say somehow, but this is actually something that's really easy to happen. I don't know, maybe you're using this tool that we're not going to talk about too much, or we can talk about it, but maybe you're using this tool, and then suddenly this face on the top that looks right, it's got more than 4 vertices. It's got 1, 2, 3. If we press edges, we can see that. It's got 3, 4, 5. Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's a lot more than 4. And the problem is you're going to have stuff like this happen. So we want most of our faces to be planar. It's funny, we don't like things that are overly straight, but if something is, like, too warbly like this, it's gonna be a bit of a problem as well. It's like a weird middle ground to hit. But as you can see, we've got a little bit of an awkward situation as far as this, as far as, like, this vertice just being in a really awkward position, and if you try and render this later for a film, if you try and do anything to this, it's just gonna cause a problem. So we're gonna undo that. So that's the spiel on why n-gons are bad and how vertices are so important. Alright, so we've talked about our castle, we've talked about adding stuff in, we've talked about so much, but, I think that there are still some more cool things that we can do to make our castle more interesting. You know, if you guys wanna use some of the tools that we've been talking about to make something other than a castle, um, then that's something that works okay as well. Oh, it looks like the stream is a little bit low quality again. I'll go ahead and reshare my screen, please. Also, hello, friend, who just joined the Discord. Alright, my screen is back up. Perfect. So, alright, we got chairs for days. Put in some nice towers. Um, if there's anybody watching so far that's got any questions, I just wanna take a pause to let you guys ask. Um, if not, I'm happy to keep going on to our next thing. There's some cool effects that we can put in. Alright, looks like nobody's typing in the chat, so we're gonna move on to some cool effects that we can start adding in. So first things first, we've made this. We've made this little castle. We've added so much to it. We've created these interesting kind of like archways for it. Obviously, there's still more that we could do. There's a lot more that we can talk about, but we're gonna call it done as far as the actual model goes. Because there's a couple more interesting things we want to talk about today. So the first thing we want to talk about is it's not just objects that we can add to scenes. So obviously there's all these objects that we haven't talked about yet, like we showed the monkey really briefly, but we've got all of these other objects that you guys should definitely try in your own time. Just see what they look like, see what their properties are. But we can also add in things like cameras and lights and all of these other things that we're not gonna talk about these bottom three. These are a little bit too crazy for us right now, but we can talk about lights. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to light, and we're gonna choose point. What's cool is that you can change to a different kind of light from inside each light. We don't have to worry about committing to any of the lights that are over here. So we'll choose point for now, but a point can turn into a sun, can turn into a spot, can turn into an area. Okay. So right now, we can't really see what our light is doing. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is that we're not in the right view to actually see our light, and the other is that our light is very small right now. So what I'll be doing is we'll be changing into a separate mode. We'll be changing into a render mode. So we have viewport shading here, and that's going to show us what it looks like just if there was like a default light that follows the camera. We have the second mode over here, which kind of shows the view with like the more advanced render. Still not that crazy because there's not any materials on right now. And then we've got this fourth mode, which actually shows us what everything looks like with lights included. So everything is very dark, but you can see there's this ever so dim light bouncing because we put this light over there. Now, if we start bringing this closer, you'll start seeing, whoa, it's shiny. It's starting to create something. It's starting to add some light there. Do I have all my stuff on? I'm gonna turn this on just for effect. There we go. So you've got a light that's actually doing something, but it's still like super soft in comparison to the world. And you know, we can shift D and just keep adding lights for each section. Um, However, before we start doing that, because we do already know how to like duplicate things. Before we start doing that, what I want us to do instead is I want us to kind of choose this light that's over here. Go into this right side where we've got a whole bunch of options. And we're actually going to finally mess with these menus that are on the right side. So what we're going to mess with specifically is we've got a little section that says object data properties at the bottom. I never remember it by its name being object data properties. I remember it because it looks like a lamp. It looks like a little light. When I click on this object, it looks like a little face. I know that that's going to be the properties for that object. When I click on this light, I see a little light. So the power of this light right now is 10 watts. Now, that is a very, very, very small light. In fact, I think that's like weaker than most of the lamps that I have in my home. I think most lamps I have in my home are like 40, 50 watts or something like that. But we want a very powerful light for our scene, so we're going to choose something like 10,000. So 1, 2, 2, 3. Whoa! Maybe that was a little too strong. We can move our light a little bit further away. And we've got like a kind of sun thing going on. Now, the one problem with this is just that there's kind of a little bit too much contrast. This would probably make sense if there was like a super bright moon, but there's literally no lighting on this opposite side. So what are we going to do? Well, first things first, we want this, or what are we going to do? We're going to Shift D, do that click thing, and we can get a second light. So now this is actually a little bit too lit, but I'm going to put this kind of there, bring it down, have it like be like around there. And I want this light that's at the bottom to not be too overpowering in comparison to this light that's at the top there. So I'm going to select it, and it's not going to be 10,000 watts. I'm going to leave it at maybe 100 watts. See how that looks? That's a little bit better. Now we don't have this kind of like overwhelming singular light that's at the top. So we can consider this like our sun, and we can consider this at the bottom here to be kind of our reflection of the sun. Maybe there's like a lake here or something, and that lake is reflecting onto our world. Now, what would be cool is if we would have an actual object to represent the sun. And it would be cool if that object glowed as if it was a real sun. Impossible? Nothing's impossible in Blender. Wow, that was so cheesy. I'm so sorry. Anyways, to actually add in a mesh, we can go to add, or to actually add in a sun, we can go to add, mesh, and I'm going to choose the cube sun because I want my sun to be special and different, and I think it'll be cool to have a sun that looks like a cube. So I'm going to put my cube over there, and it's going to kind of like, well, I'm going to put it like kind of close to the sun. I don't want it to be covering it. So already it's got this like really shiny effect on the front face, but I have plans for this cube. This cube's going to go far. This cube's going to go places. So right now it's just a cube. It's just that. It's not special. It's not like super shiny or anything. But we're actually going to go in and do just like a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of shading. Now, what is shading? Shading is this process where we change what an object shines like, or we change what an object's material is. And when I say material, I mean the surface. Right now, everything has this gray material that kind of reflects the sun in exactly the same way. So it leads to kind of a very monotonous, boring scene because there's not one object that is reflected differently. And in real life, there's so many different materials. You know, like, I don't know, maybe somebody's wearing a pleather jacket. I'm not going to talk about a leather jacket as a vegan. Maybe somebody's working on paper or something that's a different material. Maybe a spoon has a different, yeah, everything's got a different amount of shininess and roughness. And that's kind of like what we're going to work with a little bit as we work on the sun. So we're going to click on our sun. And just like there's a layout section for changing the world, just like there's a modeling section for going into that edit mode, what we're going to do now is we're going to go into a little tab called shading. Now in shading, sorry. Now in shading, we're going to see a whole bunch of stuff. It's going to be a little bit much. Honestly, my first time seeing the shading menu, it felt like a little bit over intrusive as far as all the features, but I promise you it's not too complex. Basically, where we want to start is we want to go ahead and select our object and press plus new. What is this going to do? Well, it's going to give us two menus. By the way, we're in the shading menu and we've selected our object. So it's going to give us two little like tabs, and these little tabs are called nodes. Each node has a lot of settings. Some can have a lot, some can have a little. We're going to get rid of this really complicated one, and the way you can get rid of it is by, first things first, click on the outside to deselect everything. Click on the one we want to delete. And then it's kind of like the same process that we use to delete stuff in the scene. You press X, that's going to delete it. So right now, our box has no material, and when something has no material, it can't reflect any light. And when something can't reflect any light, that's when you have a shadow. So this cube is just currently shadow. It is incapable of reflecting light. It is too edgy. So what we're going to do is we're going to press node. We're going to press add. And we're going to add in something to make it as shiny as possible, extremely bright, overwhelmingly bright. So we're going to press add. We're going to go to shader. That's the third option from the top. And we're going to look for something called emission. What does it mean to emit? So to emit means to, well, I mean, like in regular English terms, it just means to give off something. And what it means in this particular context where we're working with light and reflections, it means to emit light. So if we click on emission, we're going to get a very, very simple menu. So the last one we had like 14 different sliders. This one's very nice, very simple. It's got one slider and one little square. What we can do is we can click and drag from emission into surface, and whoa, it's like all white now. In fact, it's the opposite of what it was before. Now, if we up the strength, you can see that it becomes more and more like it becomes more and more intense as far as its reflection, as far as its emission. So if we go back into our layout, into our modeling mode, you can press object, and you can see how intensely that reflects off of our object, off of our sun. So there we go. We've got like a little sun or a moon. So in the same way that we can add in a sun, we can also do some edits to add in fog. So it's kind of weird that adding in like a really emissive object like this would also be connected to adding in fog. But what we're going to do is we're going to add in a new mesh. We're going to add in a new cube. I'm going to make that huge. We're going to make it cover and envelop our whole castle. Like that. In fact, we're going to make it even like bigger than our camera. Perfect. Excuse me. So we're going to go back into that shading mode. And as we can see, like, you can see the inside you can see the outside, and if we're outside of the box, we can't see in. So we want to make fog. We want to make something where we can actually see through. So we're going to use the exact same shader we just used. We're going to press new. Just like before, we click on the outside to deselect these two guys. Click on this. We press X, and we start with this deep shadow that doesn't reflect anything. And what we'll do next is we'll press Add. We'll look for the shader that we just used, so that's in shader, emission, and we'll slide it down. And we've got something that says emission right there, just like we had before. So we're just going to connect it to the surface, right? No, 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 no. By the way, if you accidentally connect something that you didn't mean to, you can click on the right side of it and detach it, and that way it's no longer connected. So we don't want to do the same thing that we did with the sun. We already know that if we connect it to the surface, we're going to get that kind of sun bright blooming effect. Now, if we want it to do that fog effect, what we want to do is we want to instead attach the emission to the volume. And it's going to start off with this kind of like weird in between where, okay, we can see the edges. The edges are like soft now. They're no longer this really intense, strong edge like what we had before. And it's glowy. So it's got like both of the qualities that we had before. It's got the quality of shininess, but also this weird edge thing that's going on. What's going on at a more like theoretical level is just that basically the glow is being fed into the shape. So when you put emission into volume, volume is kind of like how an object's volume is shown. So normally with that sun, it shows the edges of that sun, even if like it's hard to see because of the reflection. Here, putting it into volume says, actually, we don't want to see any of the edges. We just want the edges to have this kind of glow feeling. So that's kind of cool, but it's still intensely difficult to see what's going on inside. So what we can do to actually start seeing everything that's inside is we can bring our strength down. I think a good number is usually 0.05. Even that's like kind of too strong. So you can see there's like a ton of fog right there. You can bring it down even more. 0.01 maybe. Not bad. Maybe we can bring it down like I'll hide this cube over here. I'll get rid of this light. Go into our other mode. We can take our fog, we can make it like even lower as far as you can make it even lower as far as the strength, so 0.005. I'll actually take my cube and I'll make it a little bit smaller. So there we go. Now we've got this kind of really nice fog effect that's kind of like obscuring a little bit what the world looks like. Maybe it's like a little bit too small there. Oh, now it's a little bit too strong. I think that's probably the perfect amount. So you can kind of see it's harder to see what's behind because there's this atmospheric fog, and it's easier to see what's in front. So that's the effect that we want. So kind of learned a couple of tricks. We've learned how we can do some editing. We've learned how we can add in lights. And we've learned how we can put in fog. If I remember right, Melise, Jordan had mentioned that he was ready to show off some more advanced Blender skills. So he had mentioned PBRs and he had mentioned adding in environments. Was that still on the plate? Okay. Alright. Okay, sounds good. Um, yeah, well, we can talk about that then. So we've talked a little bit about, okay, you can add in fog and you can add in this kind of sun effect. So that's great. But what if you want to kind of have like a background? What if you want to have in most video games, you won't just have like this kind of gray emptiness. You'll usually have something that's in the background kind of showing the world. So for that kind of a situation, you're going to want something called an HDRI. So what we can do to bring up our HDRI is we can go over to this little tab that's on the right side. And you can do this from anywhere. You can like we can do that from this mode. Like all you need to do is make sure you're in object mode and that you have this fourth tab selected. So when you have that done, you want to click on this little arrow that's to the right of our sphere. And we want to click on what says scene world. We're going to deactivate the scene. So now it's going to kind of show us it's kind of like blank background. So what you want to do is you want to click on that and we want to raise the world opacity. Now the world is extremely blurred right now. It's very hard to see it. So we can change the blur so it's very low. So now we can actually kind of see like a skybox. So we can I can kind of dial down this blur. I can just move it a little bit to the left. So we can see a lot better what's going on. I'm gonna move this all the way over there. So you see we have this kind of like background world, and you can get a more detailed one depending on the map that you put in. This is just the default Blender maps. And if you want to check out some other maps that we have, what we can do is we can click on, after clicking on this little arrow that's on the top, you can click on the world. You can click on the little mirror sphere, and it's going to give you a whole bunch of options. So you can be in this kind of darker world. And what's interesting is that the world is actually going to affect the lighting. The world that's on the exterior is going to actively change how our shapes in the center are lit up. So even if I didn't have this light here, or if this light was like really far away for some reason, we can still see that this light is affecting how this object is lit. Um, and there's a whole bunch of different options to choose from. We have, you know, this one's so cute. It's got a little dog in it. So you've got this one with a little doggo, little Labrador. Um, this one actually looks pretty good. You've got this darker one, kind of like this nightlife one. I don't know if that one fits super well with the green. I think we just did this one. Yep. There's a lot of different worlds to try out. I think I'm still pretty partial to that one with the doggo. So this one inside like a hotel room. Now, I'm having this kind of annoyance because there's two problems. My castle is overly white and my light is overly white. And in the real world, light has a lot of colors. So for example, like this guy over here, the light is very blue. And, it's not just white. It's got grays, it's got darks, it's got browns, it's got a whole combination of different colors. So you can select everything. Or how do we want to start this? We can start by changing the color of the light, and then we'll move on to changing the color of each object. So we can select our light. Select our light. You can go to the right over here, and we can press, wait, where did my little, light modifier go? What's going on? There you go. I think I was, like, clicking the cube by accident. So yeah, we can click on this light over here. And what we can do is we can see that we have something called color on the right side over there. We can click on color, and we can change it so that it's maybe more blue. And now that it's more blue, it kind of reflects the world a lot better. And we can change this light, or this little sun cube that we've made too, so that it matches the sun more. So if we go back to shading, and we select that cube that we made earlier, you can open up that one little tab that we made. And where it says color, we can choose color, and we can, like, just nudge it a little bit towards blue. Maybe a little bit. And now there's, like, a lot more coherence. You can even, like, make it more yellow if you want. That's quite cool as well. Maybe you wanna change the light to be more yellow as well. So we can go back to modeling. And we can kind of, like, lower our light depending on what we want exactly. Maybe it was a little bit too much to have 10,000 watts, so we can bring it down to, like, maybe 5,000 instead. But yeah, that's step one. That would be just to change the actual, like, lights that we have. So now this light is, like, a lot more natural with that yellow hint. Now, next thing we wanna do is probably, like, select all of these guys and give them a unified material. So, how are we gonna do that? Well, what we wanna do is we wanna select everything, and we can go into Object. And then from Object, we can go to something called Join. Wait, did I select something wrong? So, select the whole thing and press Control J. There you go. And now the whole thing is one material. I probably selected the light by accident. Now the whole thing is one material. And I can go back into my little shading mode. And I'll have this little section where I can press plus new. I'll press plus new again. And finally, we're going to try and tackle this crazy menu that's got like a ton of different options. We're not going to worry about it too much though. You have base color, and that's going to be the main thing that we're going to change. We'll click on base color, make it kind of more gray. You can hint it towards red, whatever color of gray you like. I think it's always a little bit boring to just keep things overly in the white spectrum. It can be nice if that's your specific aesthetic, but if you're trying to make something that's got more coherence in the real world, or even if you're just trying to make something that's got got color in it in general, I think it's always nice to, lean your grays into some kind of color. That's just the 2D artist in me coming out. So once we do that, go back into object mode. It's still too gray for me though, so we can go back into, you can actually access the color by pressing this little material tab over here. And on the right side, you can make it more gray or less gray, depending on what you want. Now there's one more section that's kind of handy for us to deal with, and that's the roughness section. So just to kind of show you guys, just to give you guys a really quick crash course on materials. Materials usually have three main parts. They have more than three main parts, but we're gonna talk about three main parts. It's got the metallic. So when you change something to be more metallic, it will look like it's more made out of metal or less made out of metal. It's got the specular. And that's gonna kind of change how plastic it looks. It's kind of a weird explanation, but it's really the best explanation I can try and give. If I change everything real quick to have this kind of a mode, I think it's a little bit more clear what's going on as far as it being. It looks very ugly in that mode, but if I change the specular to be even higher, you can see that these highlights are more intense. I'm gonna bring it back to shade flat. That's super ugly. So we have metallic, that changes how metallic something is. We have specular, that changes how like plasticky something feels. And then we have roughness. So roughness is like the opposite of specular. So roughness is gonna make something feel more matte. So if you have a high roughness, it'll still accept light, but it's gonna really diffuse that light. If you have a low roughness, it's gonna be way more reflective, almost mirror-like. You guys can see reflections of the environment on it. So, if I combine metallic, so if I have 100% metallic and 0% roughness, that gives you a mirror, like every single time. So you can see like all of these are just mirrors. You can see the environment behind. If you have 100% specular, 100% roughness, and 0% metallic, you have like a very rough plastic material. So I'll keep it pretty rough because this is a castle wall after all. We don't want the rocks to be too shiny. And yeah, so this is kind of like this is quite a lot of content to go through on a first day, but it's a little bit about materials, a little bit about lights, a little bit about making some cool effects. Put that back in, see what it looks like. That kind of cool fog thing. And we talked about making things shiny and about putting a world behind. Um, but yeah, I think that pretty much concludes most of the content that most of the main content we wanted to cover. Again, there's always like more to cover. There's always more to fill your brain with, but I think that's any more than this is probably going to be a little bit of overload for people on their first day of Blender. But if anybody has any questions or if anybody has questions about more specific knowledge, I'd be super happy to answer questions. I've been teaching Blender with M College um, for the last 6 months, and I've been teaching Blender in general for almost a year and a half now. So although I've been working with Blender for much longer than that, and I've been working in 3D for five years now. So any questions you guys have about whether it's theory, whether it's like another 3D modeling program, I'd be happy to answer that. Um, and if not, maybe I can make a quick plug and we can call it a day, Mel.
Seems like nobody is typing, but I see that viewers list there's quite a few people watching over on Twitch. Even though for some reason it shows a different number. Um, it shows a different number on the stream, but I can see in chat.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. I don't think I have any specific questions. I guess, and yeah, I'm not sure if anyone's typing, but no matter what, it was still really helpful. Even like I use Blender, and there was like a couple of hotkeys that I wasn't that used to, and I also wasn't sure how to do the fog. So yeah, this is all super helpful. Um, yeah, I guess if anybody does happen to contact us with any questions, I'll send them over your way. Like I'll send you the questions, and if you feel like answering, you can. But otherwise, yeah, it seems like we're good.
Perfect. I guess I can do a super quick plug to my social media, which has been a little bit deserted as of late, but you never know when it's gonna start coming back. Um, my I guess I can share my Instagram. So my Instagram page is for most of my 2D art stuff and a little bit of my 3D art stuff I've done with ZBrush. You guys can find that right here at COSMONOT. It's a little bit of a long handle, but you can find me here, you can find me at ArtStation, and feel free to send me a message through either of these spots. I'd be more than happy to answer you guys. Yeah, and most of my work here is my 2D work, but there are some 3D projects I've worked on in the past here. Let's see if I can find some. Oh, not there. Yeah, a couple of 3D stuff here. A couple of rendered objects. Um, but yeah, feel free to reach out to me either here through Instagram or through ArtStation. I'd be more than happy to answer your questions, whether it's 3D, whether it's 2D, whether it's about just any kind of technical question. I'd be happy to give you guys a shot with help. That's gonna be it on my end.
Yeah, so thank you for taking the time to teach us this. Us having it up on Twitch will definitely be pretty helpful. And yeah, I guess we'll be in touch if we ever want you for something else. And thank you for taking the time to teach us this today. And I'm just going to say goodbye, people on Twitch. Just ending the stream.